Hey everybody, we hope you're doing well. We miss seeing you. We hope that the times that you're at home during this stay at home with coronavirus are going well. It's made me think a lot about relationships, that there's some relationships that we probably need to be spending more time with, like our immediate family, that often we sacrifice for the sake of work or for the sake of other things, and we just take those relationships for granted. My hope is during this time that you're reconnecting with people in your family and building those relationships and strengthening them. But the other thing I realize is there's some relationships that we're just going to miss. Some friendships, some family, people that we might see on a daily or regular basis who we can't really see now. Or even if we see them, maybe we have to distance ourselves by 6 feet from them. But at the same time, there's some relationships that probably are good for us to take a break from. Maybe we were in some unhealthy relationships or not the best relationships for us. And a lot of times when we're able to step out of those relationships, we gain perspective. We realize that those things weren't the best for us to be in at that moment. It's made me think a lot about the best dating and marriage advice I've ever gotten. And if you know me well enough, you've heard this way to understand or to keep in mind how to find the right person to date and to potentially eventually become your spouse. Because that's one of the biggest decisions that you could make in your entire life. Now, I also want to premise this by saying this is completely based on believing that God is real, that God exists, and that He desperately wants a relationship with us. Now, that's the premise that I'm coming from because that's one of the biggest things I believe in my life. But I think the second greatest decision you're going to make, aside from who God is and if you will follow Him or not, is who are you going to spend the rest of your life with? And so often we long for love. And because we long for love, we tend to find certain relationships that might be unhealthy, but do help us feel loved and do help us feel good about ourselves. And at times we might make compromises because of wanting to be loved. So one of the best advices I got about dating and about marriage was in North Africa when I was there one summer working, and I was helping out a guy named Brian. And Brian was older than me, and he wanted to give me some advice. At that time, I was friends with my wife, Patty. We hadn't started dating yet, but we were close to it. And he said, well, you've heard of the 3 M's, haven't you? And obviously I hadn't. So he began to tell me that it was the best dating relationship and marriage relationship advice that he had ever received. So I just want us to talk about the 3 M's right now. And as you could guess, there are 3 M's, and they're based on God, based on the fact that God has a plan or purpose for your life, and based on the fact that if you really long to be with somebody, that there's probably somebody out there who's longing to be with somebody as well, and you might be the match for that person. But far too often, we get the order of these things mixed up. So to help us remember them, it's simple to remember them in order of 3 M's. The first M being master. And all of this is taken out of the image we see in the Garden of Eden when God had created everything. He'd created the world. He created man. And Adam was there doing his job. He was taking care of the garden. He was naming animals, but there had been no suitable helper found for him yet. There was no Eve at this time. And so if you keep in mind that story and the process, it helps us to keep in mind the 3 M's. The first being master, that God desperately wants a relationship with us. And He also believes and knows that us having a relationship with Him is the best thing for us. In Adam's case of his life, he had God before he had anything else. Before he had a job to do, before he had a purpose, he had a relationship with God, and he knew God. And that's why the first M is master. The second M is mission. After Adam had known God, after he had a relationship with God, God gave him a job to do. And that job was twofold. It was to take care of the garden and to name the animals. And he did. He was taking care of the garden. He was naming the animals. You could imagine the immense creativity and probably joy and potential frustration he would do when an animal came up that looked different from the last and come up with another name. But God allowed him to be a part of the creative process with him. Now, as all of these animals came up, I imagine Adam kept looking at them and realizing nobody's like me. Because at the end of naming all the animals, it says there was no suitable helper found for Adam. There was nobody like Adam to be his mate or his life partner. There was nobody for him to share life with. And God put Adam into a deep sleep. But before that happened, he finished or was doing his mission, his purpose in life, his job, if you want to use that terminology. And then as he was put into a deep sleep, God took one of his ribs, created Eve, and Eve became his wife, became the flesh of his flesh, from his bones, his helpmate, his partner in life. And this allowed Adam to continue to go through life with a partner. And as they grew, they became a family. So that becomes the third M, mate. So I want us to keep in mind some things about this. Now the first M, again, is master. And the reason is because God should be number one in our life and wants to be number one in our life as well. The second M, if you remember, is mission. And the third M, if you remember, is mate. The person who will become our spouse. Now I want you to notice that the order of these is extremely important. Because when we get them out of order, our life becomes a little bit out of order as well. That the way we're designed, we're supposed to have a relationship with God beyond anything else. That should be our utmost priority, and it will be the source of utmost joy, contentment, fulfillment. Even when life is challenging, if we have God to lead on, then he will lead us through the difficult things in life. I hope you also believe that you were created uniquely by God for something, for some reason. Some of those things were created are universal. We're created to love. We're created to serve. But there's also unique things that God's created you for. The way I look at it in the most simplest of terms is like, for example, what if you loved living in other countries and other cultures, but you married somebody who didn't? So there's ways that you could see we are created differently. We're created uniquely, but we also have different purposes or different callings or different jobs in our lives as well, and different passions. And some of those go better with each other than others do. And then after Adam had his relationship with God, after he had done his mission or his purpose and was doing it, then God gave him his mate. Now just begin to imagine if we get out of order here and the mission becomes more important than everything else. Now, if the mission becomes more important than everything else, that's basically us becoming a workaholic. That the job or the calling or the purpose in your life becomes so wrapped up about your work, about the things that you are doing. You find your fulfillment from there. You push away God. You push away family as well. Many relationships become broken and damaged because of people who are workaholics, who put way too much of a priority on their work and finding meaning in their work than in meaningful relationships. Not just a relationship with God, but relationships with their spouses, with their children, with their extended family. Because in a sense, our job becomes more like our God. We're devoting so many hours a week already to our work. And we devote even more because that's what we find joy or fulfillment from. And when we put our mission above everything else will suffer below it. But if we put our mate above everything else, then we begin to live for someone else. We give up our own dreams. We give up our own passions. We give up our own desires. We actually could give up our own values because we align with the values of someone else. That it's not just us putting somebody else above our own values, our own heart, our own desires, but it's us putting somebody else above God and his values and his desires. That really the only way that our lives will be aligned in as much of a healthy way as possible is to keep the 3 M's in the right order, with our master being first, our mission being second, and then trusting God that we'll find our mate. That in every way possible, I hope that you could strengthen your relationship with God and remember that He is your master and He is the best loving Father you'll ever have. Then secondly, I hope that you'll remember you were created for a purpose. And if you don't know what that is, go try to find out. Go try to do things. Go try to serve. Go try different things out until you find those passions and those things that you were created for, and then go do them. And as you do them, and as you are following God and growing in that relationship, at the right time, in the right way, you'll meet somebody who seems attractive, somebody who seems interesting, somebody who seems to fit with your heart for God, with your passions and desires to serve and your mission or purpose in life. And then you get to know that person. And then you find out if their personality and their likes and their dislikes are a good fit with you. And just might work out to be your spouse. And if you keep these three things in order, it doesn't mean life will be perfect. It doesn't mean you and your spouse will not have arguments or disagreements, but it means that you will have things lined up properly in your life so that God will always lead you in the things that you're doing, especially in your relationship with your spouse, with your family, with your children. So I hope that's helpful. I hope it's something that you could keep in mind. It's something that I did as I continued my dating relationship with Patty. And I saw this woman who loved God and loved Him before she loved me, loved Him more than she loved me, knew what she wanted to do in life. And it worked well and it fit with the things I wanted to do in life. And then I began to say, I think I like this woman. I think I love this woman. And I asked her to be my wife, keeping in mind the 3 M's. And I hope you will do too, of master, mission, and mate, trusting God that if we put Him first, if we follow the calling and the purpose He's created us for, at just the right time and just the right way, He'll bring us to the person we're supposed to spend the rest of our life with. We'll talk to you soon. And I hope during this time of lockdown and coronavirus that we could reevaluate our relationships, reevaluate our relationship with God, reevaluate our calling or our purpose in life, and reevaluate our friendships as well as any romantic relationships, and see if there are healthy relationships we need to strengthen, as well as unhealthy relationships that we need to take a break from. God bless.